Good morning to you, Landon. Thanks for taking the time to join us. We're talking Darden restaurants. And so those at home may hear Darden restaurants and be like, I don't know what that is. But if you look a little bit deeper, you're going to realize that you probably have been to one of these establishments. They got Olive Garden, they got Longhorn Steakhouse, they got Capitol Grill. They got so many different names that don't fall under necessarily Darden, but underneath their overall brand. So especially Olive Garden, one that very common across the United States.
Yeah, I think that Olive Garden represents about 50% of their revenue. So when you think Darden, you can think Olive Garden primarily. But yeah, they have those others that you mentioned, Longhorn, Capitol Grill, and I believe Cheddar's as well. And that's actually the one that's sort of lagging, Cheddar's among the four. They all did fairly well last quarter, up about 2 to 4% same store sales, besides Cheddar's, which I think lost 2% same store sales. So it's a little bit of a laggard, but Olive Garden's really the key. And what's interesting is, with restaurants closing down, a lot of people got delivery, a lot of people got to-go orders, and now they're starting to open back up. And what we're seeing, as we can see on this purchase intent chart, the green line is the 30-day moving average of all of Darden's restaurants, the purchase intent, people talking about going to those stores. It actually held fairly well during all the COVID lockdown because people were talking about either having pent-up demand, they couldn't wait to go back to these stores, especially during Mother's Day, that a lot of people wanted to go celebrate. And then also either pent-up demand or getting, like I said, to-go orders or delivery. But now that this is weird, but now that the stores are sort of opening back up, delivery is normalizing, and people are talking much less about actually going to these restaurants. And so we're seeing that. We actually dove into these tweets to make sure this is good data. It is good data, and it's a little bit concerning moving forward for Darden. This isn't the only company. We've got very similar numbers coming in for Cheesecake, Chuy's, Chili's. They're all down about the same, about 25 to 30%. As far as the 30-day moving average on purchase intent. So it is a little concerning as restaurants are opening up, less and less people are going to them, and they've basically stopped getting delivery and carry out.
Landon, a lot of times you come on at the show and you bring data with you that is a little surprising. Sometimes it's really eye-opening what the data is. I think if you break down the data that you brought with us today, what it shows is pretty much what we thought might be happening, right? I mean, the first one, the delivery mentions. Well, once these restaurants open, we would pretty much, none of them are known for delivery. So, we pretty much understand that those would trail off. But the other one, the purchase intent, that looks like the relationship between the stock and the actual business that they're doing and the amount of business, they're kind of converging, aren't they, at lower levels, because the stock broke hard and then came back. But now it seems to be meeting where the actual business is in these names. So I think that customer purchase intent is pretty revealing in terms of the convergence between the stock price and the actual business.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's sort of a situation where you tell somebody they can't do something and then they really want to do it, right? They can't wait to go eat at Olive Garden. They've got to have it. They're getting delivery. They're getting to go. And then all of a sudden you say, all right, the restaurants are opening back up. And it's a little bit different, a third capacity, half capacity, depending on where you're at. And then people maybe aren't as interested anymore because they're allowed to. And I think there's also just a little bit of, just concern or being cautious around COVID, just making sure that people play it safe. And so now that you're allowed to, people start making their own decisions on whether they feel like that's a good decision for them and their family. But here you've got this delivery chart. I mean, you could see absolutely huge numbers in getting delivery and to-go orders right when they weren't allowed, when the restaurants are closing. And what's a little bit disappointing, I think, for these restaurants is, Alex, all the time we talk about, is this a shift in behavior? Is this sort of a paradigm shift for these consumers? The answer for getting food delivered appears to be, at least for Darden, no. It does not appear to be a giant paradigm shift. I think that people are choosing to go to the restaurants instead of delivery now that they're allowed to. And so delivery sort of got them through the tough times, and now back to normal, and delivery is normalizing where it was.
Landon, you read my mind. You knew I was going to come back with a follow-up kind of along those lines. And this is concerning to me because, what is the catalyst? What is the reason behind this? And I think you have a good point where you tell someone they can't do something, they suddenly want to do it. It's almost like you incept the opposite kind of what you want into someone's mind by doing that. But, anecdotally, Chicago just within the last few weeks started allowing, outdoor seating at restaurants and for dine-in and a lot of the different, various restaurants around the city. And I got to be honest, it's absolutely, filled to the brim. It's reservation only, obviously all within, the guidelines set out by the city. But there seems to be this large demand to get back out. And it might just be because the restrictions are starting to be lifted here that were maybe a little bit later to be lifted than other areas. But is this just a lack of Darden getting excitement around their brands? Or were there sentiment changes and trend changes that happened because of these shutdowns that are going to impact some of these companies for a long time, such as cooking at home maybe one or two more meals than families typically were maybe before the crisis?
My gut says that no, that's not going to be a long-term change. I think that when you think about you're not allowed to go eat at restaurants for a while, and then all of a sudden you are, I don't think that places like Olive Garden and Longhorn Steak or Cheddar's are at the top of your list. You want to go someplace a little bit nicer, someplace that you've really been missing. I think that Olive Garden and those kind of places are, they're fine restaurants, but they're not the first thing on your mind when you're like, hey, let's go to a restaurant tonight. So maybe this will normalize a little bit over time, but the drop off is definitely real. There's a big decline. I mean, when you look at the current pace for the current quarter, not the one that's being reported, but the one that's that started in June 1st, the fiscal quarter, then it's about negative 40% year over year on purchase intent. And so it is still holding at these lower levels. And I know that they're about to report, and expectations, I think, are about half revenue based on a normal quarter. And so the street expects really bad numbers to come from this restaurant chain. And of course, that's the case when you're shut down. But it's just interesting because you're opening up, and I just don't think that Olive Garden's the top of the list for people to go out and have their first meal. So I want you to take a look when you're out in Chicago and just see, is it Olive Garden that people are going to, or is it these other kind of places? So I know that, here Indiana opened up first, and we went across the river to go out and eat, and it was fantastic. We didn't pick a chain. We picked a local restaurant. And then as Louisville's opening up, we haven't even discussed going to a chain type restaurant. We're going to places that are a little bit more local and a little bit nicer. And maybe that's happening across the country as well.
Yeah, Atlanta, I got to be honest, I'm not sure I know where an Olive Garden is in the actual city here in Chicago. Kevin might have some more info on that out in more suburban areas. But Kevin, this does bring to a point, though, around this style of restaurant, the more chain, you see it in a lot of different areas across the country. Are these the kind of restaurants that benefit just from everyday dining as opposed to, I think he's on to something here, what Landon is, when he says you don't necessarily celebrate at the Olive Garden or the Longhorn Steakhouse. And in a way, the lifting of these restrictions has been almost celebratory as you go out for the first time or second or third time, and you're enjoying some, nicer places that maybe you hadn't had a chance to visit before the lockdowns. And as we get more and more used to, whatever the restrictions may look like going forward, that's where Darden Restaurants comes in, and you're just going out to get something to eat. You're not celebrating anything. You're just going to get some pasta, and you want to go to Olive Garden. Is that kind of where the niche is for a company like Darden?
Oh, I can give a little more color on Darden Restaurant Group because I look at their portfolio, and within 3 miles of my house, I have 4 in this portfolio. I have Olive Garden, Capitol Grill, Seasons 52, and Yard House, all within 3 miles of my house. And I can tell you that you may not go celebrate at an Olive Garden, but you might at Capitol Grill, which is a fairly high-end restaurant in the Chicago area and in the suburbs of Chicago. Seasons 52 is a very popular restaurant in the affluent mall that's about a mile from my house, and that restaurant is crowded on a daily and nightly basis. So believe me, I love my unlimited salad bar and breadsticks at Olive Garden, just like the next guy. But Seasons 52, Capitol Grill are a little higher end places that people go, and they are popular.
Yeah, I know it's good context, Kevin. Appreciate that, Landon. As we wrap things up here, I think there's a lot of ways to interpret this data, and I'm interested to see really how you're interpreting it and how LikeFolio is interpreting it. Because I look at this and say, hey, delivery largely maybe got them through some of the tougher times that were anticipated for this company, but it's not trending in the right direction here as reopening is starting. And if that is not a storm that is weathered, and that is not a ship that is right, and we don't change the direction here, we might be in some pain zones for Darden going forward. But, as you both said, there's been a significant sell-off in the stock price, and maybe even this discount that we're seeing in the purchase intent as it's come down is priced in. But I'm curious to, what is your outlook given all this information?
Yeah, I mean, the stock was 120 before all this, got down to around 40, and now it's bounced back to 75 or so, with a sell-off down to 70 today with the markets. It's, I would say that the markets are expecting very bad numbers out of Darden. I can't imagine that it's going to be a huge reaction unless something forward-looking comes out. But if they do come up off this report, and they're trading 75, 80, I may take a bearish position just because the current quarter pace is so low, and we're seeing that people just aren't excited about going to these restaurants just yet. Now, again, maybe after all the initial openings are done and people got their favorite restaurants out of the way, they'll start going back to the Olive Gardens of the world. And things might change over the next month or two. But right now, it's just not a priority for people. It doesn't appear to be anyway. And just like you said, the delivery that got them through this is now normalizing, and people aren't doing it anymore. They're going to other restaurants that are more important to them. So we'll just have to see how it shapes up. But if this pops on earnings, I may play it bearish moving forward.